This is the talent. Okay. Now I will call the Talent Priority Board Workshop to order. It is 1:30 on Tuesday, August 1st. And just by way of getting things kind of kicked off here, well, first of all, we should do introduction. So why don't we start with that?
Martinson, District 3. Commissioner Cole Fretham, District 1.
Rena Moran, District 4.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Craig Morris, Deputy Director, Human Resources Enterprise.
Wilson Kelly, Labor Relations Manager and Company.
Beth Told, Deputy Director, Human Resources Talent Division.
Annie Corbini, Chief Human Resources Officer.
Ann Reynolds, EPMO, Change Management.
Commissioner Mike Chong, District 6.
Victoria Reinhardt, District 7.
Rafael Ortega, District 5.
And then up
Human Resources Business. Labor Relations.
Karen Toll, Mr. Reinhardt. Good afternoon, Prince Corbett, Race and Health Equity Administrator.
Thank you, and we do know that, I believe that Commissioner McGuire was going to try to online listening, and County Manager O'Connor is at a hearing, and so he will not be able to make it here today. He's representing us well. I don't know where Rand went. He'll be back. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. And I'm really excited about this workshop. This has been a long time coming. But COVID did get in the way. You know, you start things and then, boom, you have to try to redirect to meet the immediate concerns. But it was never actually, we didn't stop it. We just kind of had to go through it a little bit slower. And so the idea here is that we're going to talk about talent priority and the team, and discuss, this is a countywide initiative, and it builds on the inclusive, valued, and thriving workforce that we really are invested in. And I think our budget, as we go through the budget, we're coming up on that pretty soon here as well, really talks about this as being something that is critical to what we need to do in order to achieve our goals. The program first began in 2019, and as I said, it took a little slowdown for a little bit there, but was reinvigorated in late 2022. So have really been, the team has been focused on, and you heard from who the team members are, but there are others I'm sure they'll want to introduce as well, but to realign some of our strategic initiatives around talent attraction and retention as a priority. And I think that that's really critical here. Again, we are as good as the work we produce and the impact. It's really about the impact that we have. So it's the development of core processes that promotes Ramsey County as an employer of choice. Builds a strategic HR team with the intent to modernize policy and procedures. And again, I think when we look at what we went through with COVID, and we're not totally done with that yet, but there's always something that's on the verge of being an issue that we need to deal with in a short period of time. But I think one of the things that we learned a lot, because we had to, was that we needed to modernize different things and figure out different ways to do work, and also to have the talent that we needed on board in order to get things done. And focusing on, as I stated earlier, on all of the core values that we have, including diversity and equity, and trying to make sure that we are meeting the needs of our residents, which is really what we're all about. So, as I said again, a few years in the making, but it's finally gaining the strength and support that we need to accomplish in setting its goals. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Corbin, and then I'll let you take it from there.
Thank you, Commissioner Reinhardt. As Chair, Commissioners, we are excited to be here today, my team and I. There were people that have actually did this work before we got here, so our responsibility really is to take it from where the work actually stopped. So credit to all those that worked on this before this team actually go. Allison is actually one of those true participants of this project. Without further ado, I'm going to jump in and we'll start. So today's agenda, what to do? So today's agenda, we're going to be talking about the program overview, human resources as a strategic partner, modernizing personnel policies and rules, as well as modernizing class and compensation and countywide culture. So these are the areas we'll be focusing on today. Since 2019, we've been working to build systems and processes that creates and enhance capabilities to attract, retain, and promote talent into Ramsey County in 2023. In 2023, we have made progress to move our program goals to action. So a lot of what we're doing here is for the future of the county, but it's also a process, one of the many processes that we're working on. The current state of talent priority project. At this point, we are on budget on track to hit our 2023 program objectives. HR as a strategic partner, we're on track. A modernization of policies and rules, we're on track as well. Modernization of class and compensation in progress. County culture, we're on track. As of July, we have spent 22% of our budget. We're on track and progressing with our goals for HR as a strategic partner, the modernization of policies and rules, and county culture. The modernization of class and compensation had a few delays, although we're in progress because of the resignation of our comp class. But Allison and her team have been working on that since then. But we have a modified project plan and newly identified resources that gives us great confidence that we will complete our 2023 objectives. You can see, in terms of the line of sight that we have up there, we have been able to advance this work in the first half of 2023. In the second half of the year, we will focus heavily on NeoGov performance management, launching our supervisor and manager training initiative, and preparing for 2024 compensation negotiations.
Okay. So the first area that I get the pleasure of talking to you about is about human resources becoming a strategic partner with other county departments. And the first program that we have in place with that is the NeoGov performance management system that is coming, as Annie said, it's the second half of the year. What it is ultimately, it's a competency-based performance management system that it has technology is utilized through NeoGov to have better communication, better tracking, better resources at your fingertips for employees and supervisors to do performance management. So what we've done so far, the overall goal is to just automate the performance review process so that it's in the system and actually getting completed for employees and being tracked so people get their merit increases and then certain, everyone wants to get paid. So we'll start there, but around the whole concept of performance management is a lot of education and a lot of communication from human resources. What exactly is performance management? This whole automation thing is a great thing, but there's more to it than that in terms of that ongoing communication with people, having difficult conversations. How do you track performance over time? How do you have that engagement with your people? It's not just a review once a year, it's a 365-day, a year thing. So what we've done so far is we selected NeoGov as the platform. And as you may have heard, NeoGov is our applicant tracking system. NeoGov is also our onboarding system and will also be the module for the performance management. There was a pilot that has used the performance review in the library, finance, and human resources departments that happened in 2020, I believe, at the end of that year. And then we kicked off the NeoGov performance work at the HR roundtable that we had a few weeks ago. So where we're going to go from there is the official kickoff to the project and getting the buy-in and the excitement around the concept of doing performance management. And then we'll kick off a 12-week implementation process because it'll take about that long to get the systems up and running. And while we're doing that, all the communication and the marketing will be taking place. We'll have to validate the system, do testing, training, and then launch hopefully by the end of the year. So, as I mentioned, that there was a pilot that happened last year. And so I just wanted to quickly kind of take some of these outcomes from and the findings from the pilot and walk through them, because we're going to take that information when we implement it and make sure that it's a part of the actual process as we move forward. So suggestions for improvement is to better utilize the concept of racial equity tools in the performance management process, and also more connection to the competencies and how they specifically relate to roles and responsibilities in the organization. The concept of exceeds expectation was difficult to understand, and what does that mean to exceed, or rather meet, what makes it exceed? And I'm getting a better definition around that. Simplify the language a little bit further. We don't want to make this complex. It's a bore to do a performance review, but they don't get done. And so we want to make it as simple as possible with as plain language as possible. Show how the performance review and development plans work together. There's a lot of cool functionality in the perform system. You can keep journal notes and journal entries. You can upload documents. You can create development plans. So it's not just about the performance review. That's where we're starting, and we'll be going on from there. And then more training, more examples and more demonstrations of how cool the system is and how it works, and how it communicates with each other. So what was good from the pilots is that it helps to support a culture of learning and development in the organization. So it gives that opportunity to have those conversations and to set goals and to do some forward thinking rather than just looking backwards, but looking forward as well. The individual development plans, like I said, that's that forward thinking, that idea of a learning and development culture. They appreciate the conversations, that people were like, who knew my supervisor thought that about me, or who knew that this is what feedback people were saying about me? I never knew that. So just having that conversation is just so vital to having a good work experience. And then they appreciated the feedback tracking, those journal notes, and the having one place to keep the information. So you're not trying to, I forget what the bias is called, but you're not trying, recency bias, that's it's coming to me. Recency bias, where, oh, this bad thing happened last month, but I forgot about the good thing that happened 9 months ago. So trying to get around that as well. And other notes, the theme of there was concern over the process being used to suppress wages, and that's not what the tool is for. It's just a communications means for getting feedback and understanding how you're doing your job and if you're meeting those expectations, not connected to wages. Need to help leaders see how the competencies relate to the work of an individual, and trying to draw those connections a little bit further. And need to spend more time on defining the ratings and what they mean, as I mentioned earlier. So those are some other things that we'll be looking at as well. All right, so the second program I also get to talk to you about, I'm on a roll today, is the NeoGov onboarding system, and I'm really excited about that. We are at my 11th hour at the 59th minute right here on having this all ready to go implemented and start using with people. And ultimately, it's a checklist. It's an electronic, I always use this word, I'm going to get it copyrighted. It's an electronified checklist, ultimately. So instead of me handing you a piece of paper, all the paperwork, all the sign-offs, all the things that you have to do when you come in as a new employee are electronified in the system and communicated through the system for both the employee and the supervisor. So there's no more having to sit down and hand over a piece of paper and watch someone sign it and make sure, where did that piece of paper go? It's all in the system that can be communicated and tied directly into our Laserfish, our personnel files. It also is connected to the applicant tracking system. So if an applicant is hired through the applicant tracking system, he'll seamlessly feed right into the onboarding and kick off the onboarding process from there. And hopefully, the idea of onboarding was to provide better customer service to the departments so that department leaders and hiring managers know what they need to do. Not everybody hires every day, you know, so you hire one person a year and you go, what do I do? This is going to be right there taking them through the process. It's for better applicant experience as well, and new hire experience, that they're coming on and they have this seamless connection and don't have to say, hey, was I supposed to do something? Did I miss something? It'll be right there in the system ready for them to do. So what we have done so far with this is, can I read? We completed the discovery phase, got the system designed and configured, did all the training and testing for configuration, and doing training with hiring managers and support staff and HR so that we can use the system. We approved, the change review board in IT approved the design and the system to be utilized. And then we launched. We're launching. In fact, today is our launch day. So we're here for that. And so where we're going to go from there is that there's still some work that needs to be done in terms of, did we set it up right? Do we need to tweak some things, make things a little bit better, build some job aids, more support for hiring managers and employees on what the system can do for them, continue to train and develop, making sure we provide those customer services and we have those pieces in place, and we support the teams that are utilizing the tool as much as possible. One other thing I want to note with onboarding is that it is also an offboarding product. And so we have built, or are in the process, have we built, or
We're in the process of
we're in the
building.
process of building the offboarding exit interview. What forms and checklists do you need when you're leaving the organization? And then we'll have that more ability to quantify, why are people leaving, what does that look like? Right now we do have an exit interview, but I'm sad to say I don't know where the information goes. But now we will have a method to do that, and we can put numbers and some facts behind it, and not just the anecdotal, they're leaving because of X, Y, Z. So I think that's a cool piece of this as well that we'll be putting into place. You're up, Annie.
So the exit interview actually is, we have Tracy here in HR who does some of our exit interviews, and she keeps those. If there is any information that might create some issues, she brings that to my attention. And in some cases, if it's something that needs to be known to the division director or the division leader, I will provide that information without the name of the person or collectively in terms of this is what we get. So we use that to inform the process of actually making changes. But that actually is something that we collect manually for now until this is built. Modernization of personnel policies and rules. I'm going to move this over now to Craig.
Your manager.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Training advisor.
How did I get to this one so quickly?
This is your own project.
So manager supervisor training. This is one of the most, as far as I'm concerned, this is the most interesting initiative within this project. I'm excited about this one because we're talking about developing our managers and supervisors, building their competencies and skills, and making sure they have the tools to be able to do their job a lot better. But also, it gives them an opportunity to help support our direct reports. Those are reports to us. So the nuances of, well, I don't know if he or she is doing well or not doing well won't be there. So you're developing that skill set and also in the process developing your competency. A lot of this work was done before I got here. A lot of the work was done before all of us got here. What we've been able to do here is really to redefine the process of implementation, how we're going to implement what is already on the ground. So what we came up with is to have in two phases. Phase one will be what we call a manager supervisor development course. It's in progress right now with the communication and building the curriculum that we'll use to support that development initiative. The process that we're working on is to have an HR core that consists of all of our HR operations and a curriculum development that directly supports our managers and supervisors. We'll also have a finance core that would include budgeting, We'll also have from the policy and planning team, ethics and compliance, REAS, DIOD, all of the skills and opportunities that managers and supervisors need to be able to do their job better. So that's where we are right now. The process of it too is making sure that we develop a curriculum within. So this is the internal phase of what we do. So the expertise in the implementation of this different curriculum is within. So each one of our different departments will develop this curriculum, will come together, and my DIOD team will be championing this part of the project. Phase two is what we are going to be calling a Ramsey County Academy. So we are going to be using LinkedIn.com, Linda.com, LinkedIn. So we're going to be collaborating with LinkedIn to develop what we call a Ramsey County Academy, divided into 3 phases, more like the university way of learning: 100 level beginners, 200 level intermediate, and 300 level advanced. So, and these will actually focus more on the soft skills. So what we call soft skills that most of us don't have the ability to be able to teach, but will be able to get from those that already have those on Linda.com. So we will align that to our own training initiative within the county, where if you go, the development of that aligned to Linda.com, if you click on the programs that we have on our HR Ramsey County Academy, it will take you directly to the training that you would want to take. So if you already have basic knowledge, let's use, for example, communication. You already have basic knowledge in communication. There's really no point you starting from, 100 levels. So you can move on to intermediate or you move on to the advanced level. So it gives you an opportunity to be able to ration out where you intend to start to develop the skills and competencies that we need. So these are the 2 phases that we're looking at. By the end of the year, we hope to develop phase 1, complete phase 1 by the end of this year. And by hopefully the first quarter of next year, develop phase 2 of our training program. We have a lot of stakeholders involved in this, so we have a lot of participants or collaborators that will be working with us. But this right here, I think, is going to be some of our best initiatives that will be coming out of HR and our DIOD team. Yeah.
It's your show.
Yeah, not about this one, but about slide, so about like the pilot results. Yeah, I would definitely say I echo, that piece about the performance review, like using the word like exceeds. Yeah, take a look at it too, because I believe in like continuous evaluation too. So I was just also wondering, is there a tool or something that you could also use that could do like 6-month marks, and or are there like positions in the county where it's probationary?
Yeah.
Where that would be included or incorporated too?
Yep, absolutely. So we would be building, you can build different reviews and have to do the different reviews. So it would be automatically set up that probationary reviews, like even if there's a decision to do the 3, 6, 9 month review before there's definitely things, because different areas have different performance reviews that they're not going to use like the sheriff's office or other things. So those can all be built, and those people are connected to that particular review, and then if the system is set up to be attached to a particular date, and so those dates trigger email notifications to supervisors that you have to do a performance review for the commissioner, and get working on it, and we set the timing of what those reminders look like.
And then for other notes about the theme of concern about this process is being used to suppress wages, I just have a question if this had been a tool that has also included in the conversation too.
We can't speak to that being new. I don't know what conversations were had early on, but I would have. No.
There's not been conversations with the unions in terms of rolling out the tool for performance reviews. The employer's ability to determine what kind of review mechanism it wants to use for performance reviews is, an inherent managerial right to make that determination. I think the concern around suppress for wages is and I haven't seen these survey results, but they'll just speak from what I've certainly heard, is really more about moving to a performance-based pay model. The vast majority of our unions are not currently on any pay structure that has a pay-for-performance component to that. There's a very select few of our compensation structure that includes pay-for-performance. It's largely managerial, director, deputy director sort of level within the organization, and then a couple other, various titles. So I think it's anytime, and it's sort of just general, anytime an employer changes how they do performance management, even if it's just simply using a new tool or using a new form, there tends to be a lot of, concern and anxiety about what is that going to mean for not just my performance, but then in relation to pay. But as of right now, regardless of how we rolled it out or what it looks like for our unions who are not on a pay for performance, it would have no relation or mechanism to.
Okay, but any additional conversations about, we would go through bargaining then, right?
Absolutely. If
And
we,
also performance pay would go through.
absolutely. Yep, so, wages is mandatory subject to bargaining, so anything that we were to change in terms of how we administer, be negotiated with the union.
So to add to what Allison just said, the system itself is not one that it has nothing to do with wages. It's really modernizing what we already have in place. That's what this is. So all of what you're saying is already in place. It's modernizing it in the system. The pay-for-performance part of it hasn't started, but that's a discussion. But at least the automated process is everything we do now will be automated instead of pay-for-performance. That's a good thing about this. So whether you like it or not, if it's a 2%, you get your 2%. If you got your 2% on paper, you still get your 2% on paper. So it doesn't make any difference.
Mhm.
That's just, and just to be super clear, that's for the scale where that is currently the structure. Where in order to progress in the scale, you have to have a performance review completed, and based on the different, levels of accomplishment, there's sort of different pay progression allocated. That currently exists now, and it's largely entirely unrepresented.
And there's a large population that has not received a regular performance review in their tenure at Ramsey County. And so I think this is just a little bit of that uncertainty. What's the statement behind the statement? What are you? So it's part of that change management process that we just have to work through so that people understand why it is good and what is the intent behind it, and really working through that communication and marketing plan like that.
I think a lot of that is just, the fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
Because I know when we started doing some of the market research, and we're changing the structure of our system anyway, that people thought that we were going to come through with the market study and then reduce people's salaries. And that wasn't the case, but they had to kind of get through it to figure out that that wasn't the purpose of it. It was primarily to figure out who was being underpaid, and moving people up, but people didn't lose salary because of the analysis. But I think this is similar to that. But whenever, if this is, there will be some that think, okay, this is the first step, moving away from bargaining.
Mhm.
I don't think the unions, and I was a proud union president, would think that that's a good idea. But you do have, there's still the step increases that come in that are different than the cost of living adjustments and stuff too, so.
Mhm.
So there's still steps, ways to do this, but for right now, this particular thing doesn't impact, everything there is negotiated. Any other questions? Who's up next?
Thank you, Commissioners. Good afternoon. Craig Morris. There is a common theme at this corner of the table. Both Allison and I will be talking about the modernization of things. Dr. Porvani has also referenced that as part of the overall and general work. What I'm going to talk about is the modernization of our personnel policies and rules. And what we really mean by that is to make sure that these rules and operating principles are in alignment with our contemporary values. that they are aligned with today's workforce, and that they also meet the business and employee needs of our workforce. We hope to build on innovative practices that are already in place and some internal and external benchmarking, but also developing equitable policies that are easy to understand. Dr. Propani has charged me with making sure that, while some of this work was in progress before, we really accelerate this because of the needs of the workforce. And I will tell you, in looking back both at several of our policies and our personnel rules, you will see that the last revision dates, the last review dates, go back several years. So they're not contemporary. Overall, the goal is to make sure that we adopt these modernized personnel policies and rules for onboarding, specifically to onboarding, performance management, as we've been talking, hiring, discipline appeals, and compensation. And Allison will talk more about the compensation. But also to make sure that they comport with the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, Family and Medical Leave Act, employment and military veterans, employment and personnel rules, so that they are more equitable. And that's really a huge component of this, right, is to make sure that these concepts and policies are equitable and consistent. I would also add that there is a good deal of interoperability between these things. They should have, we should know and understand how one impacts the others, and to be clear about that going forward. So what have we done? And again, I want to make sure that there's credit given to the people that deserve it. I'm just coming up on the 6-month mark. Beth and I, and really Dr. Probani, we're new to this county. But other people, including people in this room and outside of this room, have done a good deal of diligence. They've met with county planning managers about these procedures and implement policy proposals. We have established and developed a review process, and we are also working with, because of others, creating a racial equity impact assessment for policies and procedure reviews. Where we're going is to make sure that we're working to integrate these processes into the larger human resources organization and to determine which of the focus areas around our rules and policies and best practices really will serve the needs of the county. And if I may, I want to just, I'm going to deviate here for a moment. You might want to scratch out the word modernization with modernification. Since I think we created that here at the table today, Beth.
Yes, sir.
So she can do it, I'd like to do it as well. But having said that, I'd like to turn it over now to my esteemed colleague, Allison Kelly, who will talk more about the modernization of class and count.
All right. This is the thing everybody gets most excited about. In general, what are we doing? We're trying to streamline the classification compensation system that reflects our values, right? So the work to do that is really, do our titles and classifications align with the market, and do they align internally with sort of our hierarchical structure, the autonomy, the decision-making of these relative jobs. Ramsey County has created, over time, upwards of 550 plus job classifications. That's a lot. It means we have a lot of single incumbent jobs. It means, as a product, we started to create job titles sort of specific to individuals, and what that does is it makes it really challenging to manage compensation. And then you end up with multiple titles that really kind of do a lot of the same work, and how are you differentiating between those titles? So part of this was also to, in some ways reduce those number of titles to really get to what's necessary and what matches the work and is really reflective of what folks do. The other piece is, relative to compensation, does our pay ranges, do they align with where we want to be in the market and as well as internally to the organization? And so Gallagher was brought on to help us work through those pieces. We've spent a lot of time working with them. But as of recently, we've had change in the consultants at Gallagher. We have a new hire in our HR program administrator classification compensation. And we also have some new project program managers and project managers. Yep. That have, all sort of, we have some new and folks in the mix on those, and so we have everybody in place, so we'll be able to really kind of hit the ground running a little bit more aggressively over the next few months. And so, one thing, in terms of the titles over the past few years, we've closed departments, we've opened some new departments, and so we've had a lot of changes from that original sort of bulk of work that Gallagher helped us through and said, here's all your classifications, here's what you may want to consider, condensing to And over time, when we add and subtract departments and job classes, we kind of have to relook at a lot of that work, which is what we spent a lot of the spring and summer doing so far. So where we've added, the Housing Stability Office, what did that do in terms of those new titles? How do they fit in the overall structure? What does that mean for anything that may be related to those? Does that change, the variety of other titles that we want to look at? So we've spent a lot of time sort of reviewing that work to where we are in current state. And then we've taken that work and said, okay, now let's look at the classifications in relation to the pay bands, right? So not even the dollars, but just how would the structure, look? And said, this is what Gallagher's recommended, and let's go through and make sure that we as Ramsey County agree with that, right? I mean, this is our structure, we have to maintain it forevermore. And so there's been some places where we go, I think we want to do it a little bit different, right? Like, we see this as a little bit different than what maybe the consultant has recommended. And so in those pieces, we just have to, settle them out in terms of what that looks like, the large body of work. That helps us then identify a much stronger place for costing projections, so that we can come to our great leaders and say, how would you like to help prioritize this, right? What do we want to implement in what kind of phases? That also helps me put together a bargaining approach, because everything that's compensation related is a mandatory subject of negotiation. So getting to that place of saying, here's where we're at final landing spot on what we're gonna classify folks, what pay bands we think they fall into, then let's talk about what are the phased implementation decisions and how and what do we want to prioritize, first to last in that phase implementation process. Then that lets me go to the bargaining table and have a pretty good idea of, how we focus and structure that, so that I'm not sort of hitting them with a huge project and a lot of details, right? Then, so that work is on track for the most part. We've already defined our process. We've already, the unions are certainly very well aware of what we're working on. And they anticipate to see, more about this at the bargaining table. We get to the table with them in roughly June, July of '24 in anticipation of the 25 and beyond contracts, 25, 26, 27.
Yeah, I have a question from the last one and this one. Well, actually in both of these, I think oftentimes what happens is if something comes up and you change a rule or you change a policy and you add it. You get the one-person job classifications and you just add them. And so how did you, in both cases, you really couldn't just go around the edges and tweak it. And especially with the policies and rules, did you just have to, you've got the basic structure and then start from whole cloth, or how did you do that?
I think, so the rules were broken down into what we've now lovingly called batches. And those batches sort of pulled together, themed of similar rules together. So we have like onboarding, sort of new employee, new enroll, rules to, and those were all looked at together. Okay. There are, so the class and comp piece is really, that set of rules is the trickiest, right? We have to get to that landing spot on the class and comp work in order to then determine what the rules may need to change. So all of those rules like promotion, demotion, transfer, salary setting, just how anybody moves through that compensation, all of those rules are bundled together in a batch that we will dive into once we have a landing spot on the class and comp. Final, this is what we're gonna title, this is, everybody's in agreement, we've all reviewed it, and then the pay bands that would be assigned to each of those, and then how you would move.
So did you do the same thing then for the categories of, job categories? Job titles?
Relative to the rules?
No, I switched over to the.
Oh. Yeah, so the classification kind of goes hand in hand with compensation. So the structure of that model is much you know, similar and different from our current one, but it very much, assigns these various classifications and how they relate within the compensation structure. So you do them hand in hand. Do we want to call, you know, this job a certain title? And, you know, does the title and that body of work and other like titles, are those all similar? Do they belong together? You know, if we have 5 current titles, we're gonna condense them into, you know, 1 title under the new structure, making sure that, you know, the work you're doing aligns. Then you say, does that work, is this compensated correctly? So if we take these 5 and we collapse, you know, into 1, is that how we would fairly compensate all 5 of those bodies of work? And largely, hopefully there's not a huge difference between those 5 bodies. But that's sort of the level that we're looking at, and we go, oh, you know, there's that 5th one in there, it doesn't really make sense. Like, that one I would want to compensate differently for, because there's a really different level of decision-making here. So maybe we need to say that belongs in a different grouping of titles.
Thank you. Sean?
I just heard like the Gallagher study or report like thrown out several times here, so I just wanted to ask more about what that report is. And also like if I can get, like, if that's on the website or anywhere,
Sorry, did you say the
the Gallagher report?
Oh,
Yeah.
so it hasn't been publicly shared. My understanding is it's proprietary, and so
Oh,
we've not been able to share a considerable amount of that, beyond, you know, the team that's using that to then make decisions. So there are some things that Gallagher may have recommended that, you know, were not selected to be, you know, included in how Ramsey County may want to implement a new classification compensation.
But can you guys also give like just context on what it was or what it is?
Of what the Gallagher analysis was?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it basically says, here's all of the job titles you have, and we think you should put, you know, these titles and call them something else. Or, you know, how to address, like, we have a lot of series, right? We have, clerk typist 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And so largely, that is a product of our current compensation structure, not necessarily a product of our classification structure. So to move from a 1 to a 2, that's typically like a career mobility, right? You sort of, it's a way to progress along a scale. 2 to 3, often promotional. 3 to 4, also often promotional, with a 4 tending to be supervisory or lead in some way. And so, you know, what Gallagher took all of our titles, and after we had done we had all the employees fill out a position description questionnaire, 2018, 19. Long time ago now. And so, you know, they filled those out. Gallagher used certain benchmark titles to then survey, you know, within our metro market, as well as, you know, some other further out markets, just to figure out, you know, not only compensation, but also titling, right? Like, what do we call our folks, and are we really off market? Because if you call someone something, I'll use myself for example. If you just called me an HR manager, and you just post for an HR manager, you don't solicit employees, or you don't solicit anybody who has labor relations expertise, right? And so there's this, how are we titling? Does that make sense? Does that help us get the right recruiting in? And, you know, and there are titles that over time, you know, sort of change trends and we don't use so much anymore. And so Gallagher helps us, you know, their report went through all of those, made recommendations on titles. We've reviewed that, some of which we say, you know, thanks, that's great, we'll change that. And there's been a few where we said, thanks for your suggestion, we're gonna keep calling it what we currently call it, because that's, you know, for whatever reason we may have identified. Then it also assigned each job classification a band. So theirs is the decision band method. Called the DBM. You probably hear that more frequently, decision band method. And that's, you know, a series of bands and the value of those bands. So very similar to our salary plan and grade, similar concept, a little bit more condensed and streamlined. And then they would assign the jobs into that pay band, and then their census level would have each employee assigned to where they would go in that band. So through those position description questionnaires, there were some folks who, you could have 10 clerk typists who fill out that position description questionnaire, but you have one person who fills it out a little bit differently. And so Gallagher may have said, this person wouldn't be an admin assistant. Maybe all the clerks get, and let me just say for public purposes, I'm making this up. Not to say that clerks are gonna become admins. But so maybe all of those clerks become admin assistants, but the one clerk, you go, they're actually doing a lot of payroll stuff. We're gonna call them a personal benefits transaction.
Okay,
Right, so they're sort of,
So the responsibilities are a
Right.
huge part of it.
yeah, okay.
so it goes into that specific level for an individual, but also does just the overall structure of here's generally all the classifications we wanna band together.
Commissioner Martinson.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, obviously, Commissioner Moran and Commissioner Zhang were not here when this whole thing, and half your team wasn't either, so, right, to think about, it was a high-level, consultant that we hired to come in and do, all like, what are we doing, what are we not, and to right-size it, so. I
Okay.
think that goes, and I think, even though it's proprietary, there's probably parts you can share with the commissioners, so maybe you wanna do some follow-up,
Definitely,
meetings just to share so that they can be brought up to speed
definitely.
before our time here,
Yeah.
and right when I got here, so that's why.
Yeah,
Share that I really hope that the people that work for us, which I think the title is principal aide or principal assistant, please change it. It just doesn't fit.
If I may, Commissioner Reinhardt, I wanted to follow up on your previous question. As we've talked about changes to the personnel rules, and I know some of the commissioners are new, but I want to make sure you understand that we will be bringing personnel rule changes back to this body. Well, we talked about having this work done in batches, and that's just simply, again, looking at things like interoperability and just where there's synergy, right? It makes sense to group those. Any of those changes have to come back to this body. So we will be coming back to talk with you about any proposed changes to make sure you understood that. Thank you.
Thank you. Are we at county culture?
Yes. So now that exciting topic is over, I get county culture to talk about it in closing here. So under the county culture theme, we have some initiatives going about that we are labeled employee brand standards. And really what this is about taking a look at our recruiting process and how our recruitment efforts and how we hire people and making what we're doing with everything. So we have a lot of really good stuff going into place, from start to finish with just the applicant experience. Because a lot of people apply for jobs. There's only one person hired. So there's a lot more fail rate than success rate in getting employed by Ramsey County. And I want to make sure that those people have a great experience and continue to apply and not go, God, that was difficult, or I didn't like what I saw there, and that there's some consistency, some branding, some marketing around being an employee of Ramsey County, that we can build that culture up front before you even come in the door, and that we're bringing in people that understand the culture of what we. There's a lot of stuff with the hiring process too. Again, it goes back to some themes that we have been talking about: customer service, better support to our hiring managers as they go through a process they don't go through every day, mitigating risk, making sure that there's accountability to the budget. That's a big one, that we are putting some checks and balances into place to make sure that we have money to pay for these staff to come on board, and we don't have to do layoffs down the road. So there's a lot of stuff that's going behind the scenes, and just little things that are going to make a huge difference in making sure those experiences are better for people. And then we comply with the new statement, the brand standards that we're putting into place in terms of how we attract people. So what we've done already is created key messaging and established what the Ramsey County brand will be in this area. We've identified and taken photos of staff to use in the recruitment materials. We've updated the website, so it's a little more up to speed with the language we want to use. We updated the banner for our NeoGov system, our applicant tracking system. And we're heading down the road of creating the brand standards for the job boards. So when we actually post things on different websites that we don't control, that we have some standards. Establish a total rewards guide, and print materials for supervisors and ideas for supervisors to get the word out as well. Because it's not just HR's responsibility, it's everybody's responsibility to get talent here. So I want to put that out there. Everyone's a recruiter, whether they know it or not. And then digital brand standards for the social media. So getting some standards put into place for social media for that recruitment. And so kind of the behind the scenes stuff is connected to the stuff that's going to be outward facing with the recruitment process moving forward.
Yeah, you've mentioned that we're having lots more people that apply than get the job, obviously. Do we have a sense of, like, an average, how many applicants per job? I know it's relative to what the job is. And then have you worked in order to do this and upgrade your website, are you asking people, like, why they apply to Ramsey County and what's attracted to? I know I've sat in on a few interviews for the chief of staff role, and I think everyone said it was our vision, mission, and values that attracted them to Ramsey. Was that front and center then on the application, or do we make people go find it somewhere?
It's not on the application now, but that's a good idea to put that on there, so definitely make note of that. And I wish that I could tell you average. It really is dependent. I have a talent acquisition specialist position, 80 applications, which is a lot from where we were maybe a year ago in the heart of the pandemic, where it would be like 10. So the market's changing all the time. One of the good things about this initiative and this program is that one of the requirements is that if it's a benefit eligible position, it has to run through NeoGov. Right now, we don't hold people to that as much, and so we don't have the data because other processes are being used. But now we're making it a standard that NeoGov is what is used and that everything is tracked from someone applying all the way through the hire, so then it can go into the onboard piece, that seamless transition. Ask me in a year and I will have that answer.
And this is all part of the change that will be happening. I think the ease of access, also providing us with opportunity to have the data available, is why we have the systems being developed right now. So hopefully we will be able to have that change management process across the county. It's a positive change process, so making it easy for managers.
Just for those jobs that get posted through NeoGov, we do have the ability to track how many people view it and how many people apply, and then like the numbers through the process of, interviewed and, selection and whatnot. So, that's also something that my team uses when we look at, classifications for review to determine if, something's amiss with our classification. It could be anything from, are the min quals too high, to is the pay too low, or, some of these other things. But we do have ways to review that data just to raise flags if there's something to look at.
And it's on, just adding in there that it also is if it goes through the system, we can track adverse impact and diversity numbers way easier than guessing what those look like, because I will be able to say in each step in the process falling out, and you might identify that there's a certain step in a certain job that it looks like we're losing a, and we can change the process then. Don't do that.
And that's why having the automated process is important. I know we do have some backyard kind of processes right now that we're trying to change. Some of it you're aware of, so we're trying to change most of that.
So I just wanted to touch on some risks with this whole project, this whole initiative, and make sure that they're identified. Right now, there's a lot of competing work demands. We have a lot going on with talent priority itself, but we have day-to-day life to live as well. Negotiations coming up, our benefit renewals that we have to go through state statute. Those are competing demands with moving this work forward. But we still persevere. And I want to point out too, on the positive side, that things are being done. So even though this is the long haul and we've been at this for some time, we are at the stage where now we're going to operationalize the work. So we appreciate all the work that's done. We just get the glory of being the one to operationalize it. So externally driven requirements and deadlines, I'll kind of touch on that with some of these other state initiatives that have come on board, new policies that the statutes that the state has done. We have no control over that we have to do something, we have to act on it. We've had a lot of turnover in the HR department. and not just the three leaders right here, but just in general, there's been a ton of turnover. I couldn't even tell you how many positions I have vacant right now, so I'm trying to get those filled. Scope creep in any project is a big thing, and we are managing that every day, where you see something and you're like, oh, but we could also do this and could do this, and so we're trying to, keep our expectations low and put that on the parking lot to do next down the road, because once these things are implemented, it's not over. This is as why we have a change manager here. It's a change management thing for the whole enterprise, and making sure that we do it right the first time, so that it doesn't have a bad taste in people's mouths as it goes forward, and that we manage that change. And then the last risk is really that everyone's focused on their compensation, and there's so much more to it than just the compensation piece. So we don't want to focus on that and forget that there are, 16 other slides that is work being done. With that.
Commissioner Martin?
Yeah, questions, you said, we have the risk is high personnel turnover, and I know we've talked about this a lot, but are we tracking, and maybe this will be able to track the racial demographics of who's getting hired and who's leaving? Have a sense of that now?
This is specifically within human resources, the turnovers we're talking about.
Okay.
So with respect to the work that we're doing.
Okay.
I didn't follow that at all. What is specific?
The turnovers that she talked about is.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's an HR. For us to be able to continue to do the work, we have so many other competing priorities that we are hell-bent on making sure that this work moves forward. And we have to actually give thanks to Anne right here, which are one of our EPMO consultants. Stan, I don't know if Stan is here today. Stan is also one of our consultants. Elena is no longer here with us, but she was also a huge part of making sure that we actually not only understand the project before to now. So they've been huge support in making sure we continue to move this project forward. So with the team, Allison is in bargaining. She's busy 24/7, but she's right there making sure the comp and class part of it is also moving forward. She took over the responsibility of the comp and class employee that actually resigned, and she's been doing the work, her and her team. So a big thank you to Allison and her team as well, moving this work forward. So there's been a huge, support, participation. Of course, a lot of people giving their time, much more than, to make sure we continue to move this work. The fact that we're actually launching NeoGov onboarding within, for me, 10 months of my starting, 5 months, 6 months, 3 months. I mean, it's a testament to all of the hard work that's actually gone into the work that previous people who made it possible for us to continue from where they stopped. So it made it a lot easier for us. And so all of those meetings, and you've been seeing a lot of communication coming from the HR office with respect to talent priority. It's intentional. So we want to make sure everyone is involved. There's a solutions team, so we have delegations from each one of our departments that are part and parcel of making sure that buy-in is there, the understanding is there, the support is there. So there are other people that are also part and parcel of making sure this project continues. So we've got huge thanks to so many others, and we intend to make sure this works.
So is the turnover getting obviously we've hired people, but is it getting better? Or more people leaving still?
I think it's a normal, you have the norm-informing stages. I think when there's change, you will always have things like that happen, and so there's expectation as well. So it's a gradual process in rebuilding the team. Beth is doing a great job there, hiring new people into those spaces, making sure they're trained. We're carrying the load, including myself. I'm not too big to do some of the work that our employees do. So we're carrying the load of a lot of the misses that we have, or a lot of the resignations until we have those positions filled.
And I would just like to note that the work that you do, reaching out to the departments, is so critical, and And I know that that is a priority for you, and I guess I just wanted to state that for the record here, because I know at least one that doesn't feel like they have that, and I know they do. So I just, the work that you have done, and I mean you, when you started to rebuild those bridges to all of the departments and trying to make everyone understand that you wanted to sit down and talk with them and work through any issues that they might have instead of feeling like they were kind of on their own, because I know there was, it's been a while now, but where the departments didn't necessarily feel that way. So there's been some really positive changes with people getting the work done and building relationships. That's what most work is about, is building relationships and trust. Key takeaways, oh, yeah, key takeaways you've got yet. Right? Well,
I'm so good, Jason.
I just have to reinitiate our camera, we lost,
oh, okay,
but, feel free to continue, so.
okay, we're almost done. Need to go, I'll rush through.
Yes.
All right, so.
You're the glory.
I've talked enough.
So our key takeaways, so the beautiful thing about this is we're on budget, so, we haven't spent much more than we're supposed to. We're on track to achieve our 2023 objectives. We have launched NeoGov on board. We've announced NeoGov performance at the HR Roundtable. We have our quarterly HR Roundtable, so that announcement is actually gone out. We've also, managers and supervisor training will be a phased approach implementation as discussed. The modernization of class and compensation spans from 2023 to 2025, and work is in progress. Allison and her team continue to do work there. We have had internal changes to the talent priority team. You can see that right here. But I think we've been able to forge along. We need support from all leaders and employees to continue to do this work, because, I mean, our responsibility here is to put it out there that all of you use the systems that we create. So whatever it is that we're bringing from here, we want to make sure that everyone is a stakeholder in the process, everyone is a participant in the process, and that we're all moving along, you know, and there's that balance. So those are basically our key takeaways for today.
I'll throw in terms of the support for leaders and priorities and the class and compensation. I workshopped on this a couple of years ago, and I don't know if any of you were here, so I'll just reiterate. To me, recognizing that we have a lot of staff where, you know, first and foremost, the question is their paycheck. And I can understand that. And especially if you are more often working from home and younger generations, they're working to live, not living to work, even when they are in a mission-driven job, that being very clear and upfront about how proposed changes impact them. We obviously need to work through and with our union representatives, but also making it broadly available so rumor mills don't take off. Even being able to have employees plug in, what's my current job class? What would it look like under that to help relieve concerns at something point is really helpful. Having gone through a class and compensation consolidation at the state, it is challenging, and I was one of the, you know, tiny portion of people who really got screwed up by it. You know, most folks, it's fine, it's clear, it's easy, but then because of like a comedy of errors in 2 subsequent roles, it kind of got goofed up for me. But all that information was there, and it was clear, and people were able to answer questions. Having an FAQ, identifying the reasons why, so that people aren't left guessing, is really, really, really important. And being upfront and honest and transparent about all of that, and making sure people know how that, when they have all sorts of other benefits changes and whatnot, everyone is trying to figure out, okay, but what does this mean in terms of every other Friday? because that is most people's priority, because that's what keeps them in their house and keeps their family safe and healthy and fed. And so recognizing, that that's their priority, being able to assuage that fear so they can hear about all the other good things is going to be critical.
Thank you for that. I think I have two things to say there. When I came in, there was a notion that the comp and class changes was going to affect everyone. But you and I know that's not the case, right? So, in class and compensation, even at the stage where you have a whole MMB, you have a whole load of human beings actually taking care of that. Here we have just one. One. I came in, that was the first thing I asked. Class and comp is just one for the whole, over 4,000 employees. That's a challenge in itself. And number two, a lot of employees think that with the class and comp changes, all of us are going to get this adjustment. That's not how it works. Some people are already within those classifications, so those comp ratios, they're already in there. So really, if there's an adjustment, it's just for a few. I don't want to speak for you, but I'm just speaking in general. It's just for a few in terms of adjustments as to where, their classification is now located. Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure that's clear. So, but you're right. But I also wanted to use this opportunity, and Allison, you might want to as well, use this opportunity to say, the adjustment is not for everyone. And at the state, it was in batches, like attorneys, actually. So for a number of years, they didn't get there was no adjustment made to their classification. It was just in 2021 that they made adjustment to the attorney classification. Finance was exactly the same. The HR forever wasn't done. HR was maybe not HR leaders, but those that work in those spaces were one of the lowest paid in the state. So they just did it in 2021 to just move HR a little bit to the next. So you're right. And even with that, there were a few errors that were made. So all of those different changes happen. But in this case, even if it's going to happen, and the batches actually have been happening, those little batches in terms of where we're looking at. But one of the most important things is actually looking at those who earn minimum wage within the county. So those are the ones that we hopefully will be looking at. And Allison, I don't want to speak for you, but I think that's one important sector, if at all, we'll be looking at anything in the next couple of years.
Yeah, and that's where that transparency comes in. 50% of folks are already in their badge.
Yeah.
Being able to plug something in and be like, oh, this really doesn't change anything in terms of what comes home to me. I'm not going to be mad about this. And you got another chunk of people who, I'm going to get paid more. We should absolutely do this. Like being able, like getting 4,000 people angry at you. We don't want that. Let's get those easy batches. Be really clear so it's not like 4,000 really stressed. We can tell them clearly, this isn't going to have an impact on you. It's like you might get a few cents more, and then if you might get quite a bit more. That's great. Like if we can assuage those fears, that makes it easier for us to do the more complex work, whether it's attorneys or HR, whoever it is down the road, and we can focus on that and worried at the same.
Well, I can tell you from experience here, I worked for Commissioner Bob Orth in 84 and 85, and I remember in 1985 that we had to fill out these things for class and compensation, and I think that was the last time it was done. Honestly, but I do remember complaining about it. Why do I have to do this? But anyway, and honestly, I really do believe that it was the last time there was anything that was comprehensively. Sometimes there's been little parts of things, but even that may not have been countywide, I'm not sure. But anyhow, so thank you very much. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just also want to mention that I really appreciate the manager and that will be rolling out to support the development of our emerging leaders. Because a lot of time folks who have been working in their specific field so long, they become the subject matter experts. But then there's like no room for growth, and if they are, they're like basically learn to lead,
Right.
right?
Right.
So I just really appreciate that, and just the thought into that. And I echo, Commissioner, Reinhardt's, piece about renaming the principal assistant. I feel like it's not used in this field, like, I've never seen that position listed anywhere, for this type of job, so folks would not even know what that is. And then also just the other question is, like, would there be, parts for, like, steps at all, like, for the classification bands?
So that's part of the comp model, and so I think there are still a few final decisions to make. I think I'll look for we had some board presentation docs, I'll pull them up from a couple years ago, I can share those out for you, so you sort of get what some of the other, board members have had, but, so, while it's not final yet, but in theory, you could have steps up to what's called the midpoint, which is very similar to our current structure. You have steps that take place, 6 months annual basis up until sort of that middle, marking in the scale. And then the decision point is really sort of from that midpoint to the max. How do folks progress, right? And currently, under our structure, we have a couple different options based on what plan you're in, but largely, they are 5-year increments between those steps. That's really in my recollection, one of the primary drivers and, one of the more concerning points of why we really wanted to revamp our comp structure, because it locks you into a 25-year comp plan. We've seen a lot of other metro areas shift to something that looks different than that. So do you progress annually? Do you progress based on time and step? Do you progress every 2 years? Do you progress based on performance or any combination thereof? So those are some decision points that will happen. So whether or not there are steps or if it's what's called an open range, right, where you could move sort of a percentage value from where you sit today. So it's not quite steps. So there's some options, and those are some decision points that tie pretty closely to.
Thank you.
And I think that, well, a couple of things from, key takeaways for me today anyhow, was one is I do think that having the vision, mission, goals, that statement, on our employment application is a great idea, because it's right up front. This is what you're getting into. And that we value our employees, we value everyone in our county and the services that are provided. The other thing is stressing again the fact that whatever changes are made here come back to this board. But to come in and dump everything at one time would be overwhelming. And so we will hear more as we go on here, but we're in a good spot right now. It's great to see the progress that's being made. And it did have to, just sit for a little bit because we had other things that we had to just get by and try to figure out what we were gonna do. But I'm really happy to see the progress that's being made. And also, I know that you had sent out, because I put it in here, the compensation, the MICA HR metrics.
Yes,
I don't know, I think that went to all commissioners.
yes, it did.
It did. I just thought it was fantastic. Still, there's work to be done, there's no doubt about that. But, you know what, we keep our promises and the goals that we set, and we are well on our way, and I think others can learn from us at this point. So, all right, is there anything else from any commissioners? All right, we are adjourned.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, we did that this morning, come on.
Yeah, great job.
All right. I was like, oh, where's that? Yeah, okay, I'm back, because I was getting you. Yeah, I think I like to reach out to you.